Welcome back to Back Points. Today's state champion guest is Stacy Woodhouse, a 2-time champion and a 3-time finalist from Great Bridge High School. He's going to tell us what it was like in the Great Bridge wrestling room when they were an unstoppable force in Virginia and one of the top-ranked wrestling programs in the country. Let's get right into it and hear about his journey to a state title.
He taught me to get up when I didn't want to get up, when I wanted to quit.
I had high goals, man. I've always had high goals.
And so when I won it, I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, you guys are right.
It's not the thrill of winning. It's the joy of having that personal goal and being able to achieve that and walk off the mat with your head held high and with your hand up.
You know, you were just constantly drilling fast.
That was when I really started doing the kind of wrestling that I was capable of.
Anybody that steps in the ring and just decides to commit the entire time is a state champion in my book.
Welcome back to another episode of Back Points, the podcast where top wrestlers and coaches reveal their secrets about how they won state titles in high school wrestling. Today we have a great guest. He's both a 2-time state champ and a wrestler from Great Bridge High School. And he's currently building an organic, sustainable farm in North Carolina. Welcome to Back Points. Stacy Woodhouse is here with us today.
What's up, Will? How's it going?
Great to have you here.
It's an honor. I appreciate you inviting me. I don't get a chance to talk wrestling much, so this is fun.
Well, this is what we're all about here, and we also want to hear about the farm. And so, why don't we start off by asking you the question: what's more difficult, winning a state championship in wrestling, or building an organic farm?
Oh, there's nothing I've done since I left wrestling that's tougher than wrestling. I mean, besides, and that's one of the great benefits of wrestling is that you go through things that that toughen you for life, you know, and that's one of the main drivers and one of the main benefits of wrestling. You couldn't pay me enough money to go back through a 4-hour Steve Martin wrestling practice. I mean, there's not enough money in this world for me to go through that for even a year. So, you know, it's something, and there's personal stuff, obviously, that, you know, you deal with the death of a loved one or something that is emotionally difficult, but physically, mentally, there's nothing that compares to wrestling. So you brought up your coach, Steve Martin, and you were a part of his wrestling team for 4 years. Were you a part of the Great Bridge kind of feeder program before that, leading up to high school? I went to the junior high in Great Bridge. I started wrestling in Western Branch, actually, which is a big competitor to Great Bridge. And we moved over to Great Bridge for mostly, actually, a lot of people don't know I was a baseball player too. And so we moved over for baseball and wrestling when I was in junior high. And, you know, a common misconception was that, you know, Steve would go around recruiting people, which he didn't. I mean, he didn't ask us to come. He didn't probably even know who I was, you know, until I came over there and started wrestling with his guys. But no, we made the decision to go to Great Bridge, and my parents had a chance to buy a lot on a lake at Great Bridge, and so that was the reason we were there.
So I'm sorry. So you were there for baseball,
and wrestling, yeah. So I was a catcher and a pitcher, and you know, was fairly good. And I probably could have gone to college for either.
And you ended up going to American University, and you wrestled at AU, I think.
I did. They dropped their funding for the program going into my junior year, I believe. And you know, I separated my shoulder my freshman year there. It actually the first tournament I went to. And I just really wasn't the same after that. That kind of ended my wrestling career. I tried to keep on going, and then they dropped the program. And you know, wrestling full time as a job in college, working to make some extra money and not getting paid to wrestle was not on the list for me. So when they said, well, you can still wrestle, but we won't be giving you a scholarship anymore, I said, well, you have a good day. I will be done now. So yeah, it's a job. I mean, when you're in college, that's your job, is to wrestle, and to work a job and not get paid is effectively was not good, especially when I was in a situation where I had to make money to pay for school. So.
Well, I mean, it's a tough story that we're hearing. I mean, ODU just dropped their program very recently, which your coach Steve Martin moved over to, of course, and so it's unfortunately a story that's continuing where colleges continue to drop programs.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of reasons for that. Wrestling just doesn't put people in the stands. It's not a big moneymaker. And when colleges look at what to drop, I mean, maybe barring like an Iowa that packs the stadium, but there's, it's not a big moneymaker when they look for places to cut. Nobody cries when you cut the wrestling program besides wrestlers.
Unfortunately, that's true.
Yeah. So I understand that, and but it's not like you go to college to wrestle and then you got to have an MBA of wrestling. I mean, you have Ultimate Fighting now, but you better have something else figured out. And that goes for any sport. But there's not like this feeder program into a lucrative career unless you want to. You're one of the few people that gets paid to bludgeon people for the next 10 years.
So it was a job for you in college. Did you also think of it as a job in high school?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I enjoyed wrestling in high school. Of course, nobody enjoys the grueling practices. I mean, from the time I was in junior high, I don't think a lot of people that went to other schools realize, from the time you're in junior high, if you're one of the top wrestlers, you're practicing every day, and you're doing morning practices, you're doing 4-hour practices in the evening, and you're wrestling on Saturday, and then you're getting them up on Sunday and running 7 miles on Sunday. So it, nobody enjoys that, but when you get to on a Wednesday and Saturday, when you get to go and perform, I love that. I love that. But it was also a means to get an education. It's my parents told me pretty early on, probably I was a freshman or so, and my dad's like, and probably more people know my dad than me, actually. He's been a referee in Virginia for a long time. But he was like, those things, college funds that you hear your friends have and stuff. I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah, you don't have one. So, you can either get a scholarship, or when you graduate, you can get a job. But you're not going to be in this house when you graduate. And it wasn't, my dad and I have had a wonderful relationship, and I love my dad to death. I mean, he lives on my farm now. But it was just the way it was. I mean, this is what his dad told him, and that's just how it was. So, I took that to heart, and I knew, I didn't concentrate. I mean, I probably didn't open a book, unfortunately, my whole high school career. So I knew it wasn't academics because it was going to get me in there. And so I focused on wrestling and getting a scholarship, and that's what I did.
Did you play baseball all through high school as well, or did you stop doing that, focus on that?
I think Steve had a talk with me like after my sophomore year, and he was like, Woodhouse, if you want to go to college for wrestling, you have to wrestle year round. You got to stop this baseball stuff. And I had to this day, I have an injury on my catching hand, in my wrist, and that I could tape up for wrestling. And once I got into the match and kind of just didn't feel the pain. But it catching and swinging a bat, just, it was excruciating. It just rolled over that joint more for some reason. And so the combination of those things and the pressure to, continue to wrestle year round, I stopped playing baseball. But funny enough, after I got a scholarship into American University, I got a call from a semi-pro wooden bat league after my senior year and I hadn't swung a bat in 2 years at that point. And I said, look, we need a catcher for our semi-pro team. I was playing with the same Tidewater Tides guys and those guys. And they said, I said, I haven't swung a bat in 2 years. And they said, well, just come out and just, we know you were a good baseball player. Let's just see what you can do. So I came out and off the bench, so to speak, and batted like 500 in a semi-pro wooden bat league after 2 years of not even touching a ball. And I was like, man, maybe I made the wrong decision. But in that time, my wrist flared up again, I did realize that I had to make the right decision. Like I was never going to be a pro baseball player unless I had some major surgery or something, and it was probably not going to be a longevity thing for me. So I'm at peace. I'm glad that happened because I'm kind of at peace with the way it worked out.
I'm sure you don't remember this, but you and I met when you were at American University because I came up for a camp. I was a new wrestler, and I remember you having, I think you had a shoulder injury, but you were very helpful. It was great. It was great meeting you, and there's no way you know this, but I actually somehow I got a VHS copy of your one of your state finals matches when I was a freshman in high school. And I remember it was one of the few, back then we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have any way of studying tapes. And so I studied your finals match. That was one of the very few things that I had. So I'm pretty familiar with your stuff. So, but I didn't realize the injuries were so, kind of so prevalent with you.
Yeah, I had quite a few injuries in high school. I mean, the college one was, I think I was wrestling the Chattanooga guy. He was a senior. I was a freshman, and I was beating him pretty badly. He chose top in second period, and he just literally just grabbed my wrist and ran it up my neck and just separated my shoulder. It was just like, he was just like, I'm at least going to hurt you, if I can't beat you. And I ended up still beating him. I finished that match with a separated shoulder. And I hit an All-American from Virginia the next round, and it went 4-2 with him with a separated shoulder, and as a true freshman. So, and then I continued to wrestle for about a month and a half with a completely torn labrum and a separated shoulder, because the school orthopedic didn't want to give me an MRI. And he was like, "Oh, if it hurt, if it was torn, or separated, it would hurt so bad you wouldn't be able to stand it." And I was like, "Well, it hurts pretty bad, And so anyway, they finally did an MRI. And we're like, "Oh, we're sorry about that, But yeah, and then in high school, my junior year, I believe, I worked out with 89 pounder. I was a 52 pounder, and Eric Leonard is a great guy, and haven't kept in touch with him, but he's a wonderful guy. And so Eric, we were wrestling, and I wrestled with him because it was the closest weight that I could actually get some competition with in the room, and because he was so strong, and he was on top, and he fell down on me, and I hit my shoulder just right, and it broke these 3 top ribs and fractured my sternum in 3 places. And I finished. That was a couple months into the season, and I won state that year with that injury. So
I see. Yeah. I think I saw that match on tape, and I would not have guessed that you'd had that kind of injury through it.
Yeah. That my junior state title, I had fractured sternum and 3 broken ribs, and nobody knew. There wasn't. Of course, we didn't advertise that. But every morning I wake up with a heating pad, so I could get out of bed and go to practice.
You transferred into the Great Bridge Middle School in 7th grade, and that was when you began morning practices and 3-4 hour afternoon practices year round, with the exception of the baseball season. And then at some point, maybe your sophomore year, you started to focus exclusively on wrestling.
Yeah, when I was in 7th grade and 8th grade, I would go and run with the high school guys, on Sundays after the Saturday practice, which was completely a no to run on Sundays, but it was voluntary. So, but yeah. From that and most, that's the way, when Carl Perry was in 7th grade, he did the same thing, and the guys, it wasn't the whole 7th grade class, but, they would kind of pick a few people that they thought, were at the level where they could do that. And I was, I guess, one of those. But when I came to Great Bridge, there's actually more people that knew me through baseball than who knew me through wrestling. So it wasn't like I came on the scene and people were like, oh, Stacy Woodhouse is coming to, Great Bridge for wrestling. It wasn't like that at all. In fact, when I came to Great Bridge, I knew 2 moves. I knew, well, actually maybe 3. I knew a double leg, I knew a headlock, and I knew a half. Now, I beat a lot of people with those 3 moves. I mean, I even when I was in Western Branch as a kid, I was placing in state at the freestyle tournaments and things like that. But I didn't know anything. I mean, I got there and a lot of people know about Steve, but Wayne Martin was in that room every day, and he was in the junior high room when I was there. And I mean, when I was in 8th grade, I mean, Wayne and I would go at it, and he was like my technician before I even got to high school. So by the time I got to high school, I mean, I was technically ready to go. And I traveled when Wayne would do the Granby camps, traveling around, they took me with them, and we would go all around the Southeast, on the weekends teaching Granby camps. So really, not to dissect it too much here, but so basically that's 2 solid years of kind of the Granby Great Bridge program prior to high school. Right. Yeah, I was pretty well indoctrinated by that point, and I mean, I came into high school just like every other Great Bridge kid that had been there their whole life. Mm-hmm. And so, so there is a distinction then between the Great Bridge kids who kind of grow up in that system and they've been indoctrinated in it maybe for many more years, and then other folks like you who start in middle school but get that that really total immersion into the Great Bridge system. And so, maybe you pick it up after a couple years and really internalize it and become a great part of the program. Yeah. I mean, I think I came early enough. If you came in junior high, you're fine. But I mean, we had a lot of kids that came over, thought they wanted to come over to Great Bridge and wrestle for Great Bridge. And, they would come over and say as a sophomore in high school and just couldn't handle the practices, and just couldn't, they're like, well, I'm not doing this every day, and so they would just go back home, and they would never come, or they would come over and the second string Great Bridge kid would be beating the tar out of them, and so they were like, well, I'm never going to make the team, what's the purpose of this? So yeah, that happened a lot. That happened actually a lot. How many guys would come out and stay on the team when you were there? Would it be 75 guys or, 35? Steve never cut anybody. There was never a cut ever. It was kind of attrition, through pain. I mean, there was just a certain amount of people who just wanted to stay there. And it was probably, I say we had 35, maybe 35 in the room. Interesting. Maybe 40. And I'm very open to be remembering that wrong. Yeah, I'd say 40-ish people maybe. Yeah, that's it. So I've been talking to a number of coaches, and the Robinson coach was telling me they have about 75 come out, and they don't have a huge room, but they divide it up into JV and varsity. I would imagine with 35, it sounds like they would all work out together, or in general, it sounds like Great Bridge would have one big practice. Yeah, that's right. And then, so what was the off season like? I mean, was it just a continuation of the season, kind of, just the same intensity? Well, it wasn't the same intensity. I mean, one thing, Steve, I think I give him a lot of credit for is he really understood, I guess, through Gable how to peak and then let your body rest. And a lot of people look at Gable and look at his system and the Brands brothers, and they just train themselves to death, and they run their body down. And a lot of people think they're emulating. It's like watching a great martial artist and you think you're doing what they're doing, but you're really, hurting your hands or whatever it is. And he really understood the cycle. I mean, when we were heading to the state tournament, the week before the state tournament, we were playing Frisbee. We weren't even wrestling. We might roll around a little bit, but we were playing basketball and Frisbee and and letting our bodies rest. So we were at, full capacity. So in the summertime, it was a little bit of that. I mean, we still ran a lot. We concentrated on running, lifting weights, cardio, and keeping. So when we got back into the fall, it wouldn't be a shock to our bodies for the cardio. And of course, there was freestyle wrestling. We were, supposed to go and do freestyle. And so I won, I don't know, 3 or 4 state championships in freestyle.
So was the freestyle program, was there a kind of a Great Bridge style of freestyle wrestling? Did they teach freestyle?
I remember Steve teaching a little bit of freestyle, but it was more like, just go out there and kind of do the stuff that you normally do, and you'll probably beat most people anyway. I mean, there was not like a great technical, resource for freestyle. I mean, I was a funky wrestler. I mean, I like to do strange stuff and anyway, so freestyle kind of suited. And I was kind of a thin guy, and I wasn't real. I mean, I might have been. People said I was strong, but I didn't feel like I was strong, and so I was more technical and using leverage. And so freestyle really, was great for me. I thought it suited me better than folk style. But no, it was more like freestyle was a means to better your, technique and folk style more than anybody really focused on freestyle. It may be different now, but we would still have guys out there Granby and freestyle, so it was, it was hard to break that, and there wasn't a lot of concentration on focusing on that.
Yeah. So obviously the, Great Bridge coaches expected to win state titles, and clearly for the program, they set clear goals. Did they give you a lot of guidance on teaching you how to set goals and helping you set goals on, what things that were attainable for you?
No, not at all. It was, you were just expected. I mean, they weren't helping us set goals or anything. I mean, you were expected to win a state title. That was the very least that, you were expected to do, and hopefully 2 or 3, so no, it was just a built-in expectation. If you were on that team, you really should win a state title. I mean, there was, a lot of people on that team could have gone on another team, the second string guys, and come in and placed in state for another school and didn't even make the team. My freshman year, I didn't even make the team, and my sophomore year, I got second in state. That wasn't uncommon. And that was a lot for a lot of guys. Some guys didn't get a chance until they were, juniors or seniors. But yeah, there was definitely an expectation, a very high expectation, that if you're on this team, and look, I mean, if you're putting your body through what we put our bodies through, you don't do that just to, hope you place in state. I don't remember anybody just being like, I just hope I place in state someday, like that. That was not a thing. Definitely. He believed in us sometimes more than we believed in ourselves. And he knew that we could, first of all, he knew how hard we worked compared to everybody else, for 99%. And so he was like, he'd constantly tell us, like, you guys don't understand. Like, there's nobody in the state, nobody in the country, minus maybe 3 schools that work as hard as you guys do. You should never lose. I mean, that he would constantly tell us that you should never lose. People would go up to Steve and hand him sheets of what some wrestler did that I was about to wrestle, and Steve would rip it up and just throw it in the trash can and said, Stacy's going to tech this kid. I don't care what he does. And this would be like a guy that was like second in state or something, it's just like, Steve's like, this kid doesn't even have a chance, and I heard about those things like after I graduated college, and people were like, I went up to Steve and handed him this sheet on this tough kid that you were about to wrestle, and he just ripped it in my face and just threw it in the trash can. And I was like, well, that sounds like Steve, so yeah, it was, but I learned something. Something I did do is a lot of visualization, and I learned it in freestyle. As one of the freestyle coaches, it wasn't Steve and it wasn't any Great Bridge coaches. One of the freestyle coaches that was in charge of us going to nationals, and they talked about visualization, and then I bought a book on it or read it somewhere, and and I practiced that. I don't think anybody else did on the team, but I would close my eyes and go through the match and envision winning before I went to bed, and envision my hand being raised, all the moves I'd go through, and I did do quite a bit of that. I can't say I ever mastered the thought in my head that I just got to go out, like, to get rid of the nerves. I think that's a fallacy that you're going to get rid of nerves by thinking that you can do the best you can do. I think it's important for parents when a kid comes off and just to say, look, you wrestled your butt off, you lost, but let's get better. But internally, I mean, if it was, there's some kids you wrestle that you're like, okay, this is going to be a joke, but if it was even a close match, and it wasn't just a walk, like, yeah, I always had nerves.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a fallacy to think that you can eliminate nerves, or even that it would be a good thing to eliminate nerves. I think that would be a fallacy. But I do think, and you see this with some kids, maybe not at Great Bridge, but you do see it with some kids where it goes so far in the opposite direction, where they're so afraid of losing that I think for some of them, I think it's important perhaps to go, to explain and help coach them through the just what happens. You go out there, you lose. What's different? There's no big crisis from a loss. And I think so it may just be that some kids need one type of coaching, some kids need to hear something slightly different.
I completely agree. I definitely don't think there's enough coaches and parents, living by that and telling the kids that. And I think the kids need to hear that, because, I am not a, everybody gets a trophy type of guy. No, but at the same time, if you think about it, if parents would step back and think about it, you don't win the match on the mat necessarily. You win the match in the practice room, in the weight room. It's most of the times it's already decided when you step out there.
And what about getting scholarships? Did they talk to you about a goal of using state titles and excellence in high school to pay for college? Was that part of their thinking, or did they, obviously that was what happened. Is that something that they talked about, or was that also a built-in expectation?
No, it wasn't really talked about. And it was my goal for sure. I was very clear that I wanted to get a scholarship, and that was going to be my ticket to get an education. But no, it really wasn't talked about. It wasn't really promoted. There wasn't really a lot of assistance when it came to like getting recruited. I think you're just kind of expected for your ability to kind of bring people to you. So
curious, how many coaches were in the room walking around, just kind of involved?
So I'm gonna miss somebody. But first of all, my workout partner up until my sophomore year was Matt Small, who's now the coach of Great Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And he was kind of a coach in itself, and a big brother, and but you had Steve, you had Wayne, Billy Martin Sr. Was in there, which nobody called him Billy Martin Sr. He was the old man, and everybody said the old man. And it wasn't in a disrespectful way. It was just, that's what I think maybe Steve or Wayne called him that, and obviously not to his face, but it was an endearing term. We said, "Oh, the old man's here," And one day, I think it was Carl said "old man" in front of Billy Martin Sr. and Carl Perry, and Billy Martin let it be known that he was not the old man, and so from that day on, I was like, "Oh, it was a loving term to us," But Billy Martin Sr. was in there a lot. Up until he had to be in his 80s when he was in there, in that hot 100-degree room, for 4 hours. And then we had, I think David Hall was in there a little bit while I was there. And Chris Smith. How can I forget Chris Smith? Chris Smith. Oh my God, the time that guy's put into that program and what he meant to the kids. at Great Bridge. I mean, I can't. I spent countless hours wrestling Chris Smith and us going at it, and yeah, and Joey Guth, I think was not Joey Guth. Oh my God, Goth. I feel horrible for forgetting. There was many other coaches.
Yeah.
There was many other, and the college guys would come back. You know, Strickland, like my senior year, I remember Strickland coming back. I think he was at ODU at the time, and he'd come back and to wrestle me, and he, you know, he wanted to get a better workout, and so he would come to the high school room and work out under Steve and have us wrestle, and we would go at it when I was a senior in high school. So a lot of times college guys would come back, and especially if they're in the area, and they're like coaches too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a huge advantage to have the older guys coming back to keep the program going. So it sounds like that was a huge part of it for you guys.
Oh no, it definitely was. I mean, you know, having guys like, you know, Mark Strickland in the room, you know, probably one of the best technicians to ever come out of Great Bridge, and to be able to wrestle with him. I'm still in high school. He's in college. You know, he was 4 years ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that you can't. I mean, there's nobody I was going to wrestle in high school that was even close to Mark Strickland. So you know, I couldn't have had a better person to beat up on me. You know.
Yeah, he's a legend.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about a strength program? Did you guys do? I mean, you mentioned that you were strong, but you weren't known for big bulky muscles. You know, did you have a strength program? Was that a big part of of the Great Bridge methods?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the person that kind of took the Great Bridge strength method, I mean, Steve, when I got there, it was kind of like Iowa style. You know, you see the Brands videos where they're going, you know, they're just kind of just throwing weights around, and it's more of a cardio thing. We did that, you know, and then Steve Sakis, who was the 45-pounder, my workout partner my senior year. Steve Sakis' dad, Big Steve, was like a state champion bodybuilder and weightlifter. And I'm not sure if you ever knew him, but he took the weightlifting to a very technical level and really brought Great Bridge weightlifting and strength training to a whole nother level. And so my whole high school career, pretty much after my sophomore year, was under Steve Sakis' dad's program. And so we did squats and deadlifts and bench press but we also did a lot of in season. That was off season mostly. In season, we did a little bit of weightlifting, but we did mostly, you know, pull-ups, push-ups, walking on your hands, you know, more, you know, holding your own body weight stuff, mostly so we don't hurt ourselves, you know, so you didn't get an injury in the middle of the season for doing, you know, your squat technique wrong or something silly like that. But no, weight training was absolutely a part of the program, but the heavyweight stuff was mostly in the off season, summer and fall. And we got into the season, it was light weights, repetitions, keeping strength, and then, you know, pull-ups, push-ups.
So you mentioned injuries, and how much live wrestling was there in the room throughout the year? Was it, or not through the year, but through the season rather? You know, a lot of coaches will do tons of live wrestling, and then they'll accept a lot of injuries, you know, that come from live wrestling in practice. And then other coaches will, you know, go for 30-second goes, 15-second goes, situational wrestling. And, you know, but they won't have a lot of actual like 6-minute style or 20-minute style matches. What do you remember from the Great Bridge room?
There wasn't much live wrestling. I mean, when you compare to, you know, you go to college or you go up in, you know, Pennsylvania, and they like do 15 minutes of drills and then like go wrestle when they just wrestle the rest of their practice, you know. And in Steve's practice, it was, you know, of those 3-4 hours, it was like, you know, 2.5, 3 of just drills.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were just constantly drilling and drilling fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, it might have been 15-20 minutes of wrestling. And we were very careful about who we wrestled with, and you know, you wouldn't put you know, say, you know, me and Carl Perry together, you know, because we just try to kill each other, and I mean, or maybe that's a bad example. Carl and let's say I think Aaron Beatson or somebody like that was his age. They would try not to put people together that are very, very competitive all the time. You wouldn't put Bass Knight together with one of his contemporaries at around the same weight. So they would mix and match. And when we had somebody that was really good, they would wrestle Steve, or they'd wrestle one of the college guys that came in. Or sometimes David Martin, Steve's older brother, would come in, and he worked at the family. I think he was at the time working at the family winery, and he was he had to be in his late 40s when he came in. He was a 4-time state champion.
Mm-hmm.
And here this guy comes in off the street, just probably been tasting wine all day, at the winery, just making sure the winery's running good. And he come in there and beat. I'm a senior, and I'm ranked in the nation. And this 40-something-year-old comes in there, weighs the same as I do. It's not like he's a big guy, and just beats the life out of me. It's just like he's so out of shape, but he was so good. He was so good, and it's keeps you humble, But yeah, I forgot what you asked me. I went off on a tangent, I think.
I can't remember what I asked you either, but I think what you gave me a better answer than probably whatever you deserved.
Yeah.
I don't know what years Steve Martin was at Iowa, but I went to a big thing for me was going to the Jay Robinson intensive wrestling camp, where Jay Robinson, at one point, he was the assistant coach for Gable and really did a lot of the practice room kind of, design. And so, he always made the distinction between hard drilling and drilling. And, hard drilling was basically live wrestling, but it was controlled. It was drilling, but it was really intense drilling. And, it sounds like in the Steve Martin room, there wasn't a lot of just free form, live wrestling, but there was really intense drilling, maybe of that kind of nature.
Yeah, it was surely intense drilling, but it wasn't. I wouldn't call it like live drilling or anything like that. It was you were literally just building muscle memory, doing things thousands and thousands of times. I remember being at the Beast of the East, and the Blair coach, I forgot who, Buxton, I think was the Blair coach at the time, and he commented to somebody that he had never seen a better technical team than he was watching the Great Bridge kids drill. And from the worst kid on the team to the best kid on the team, you could not tell from watching him drill that he was not good at actually wrestling, because you just did it so many times. Every little, Steve would, your elbow's a little low, your hand goes here. And between him and Wayne and Billy Martin Sr., you were perfect. You could, I haven't done an inside step or sweep in, 20 years. And I guarantee you I could do one right now perfectly, because my body has not forgotten. I've done so many of them. I could do it.
So how did you make the transition into organic farming?
Oh, that's a really long answer. So I came out of American, and at the time I was helping out with a gentleman from Georgia who had met me at the Granby School, and I was helping his son and his son's partner at the Granby School, and he was so impressed with how I dealt with his son, he offered to bring me down to Georgia to teach camps there. So while I was in college, after I'd stopped wrestling, he would fly me down to Georgia, and I would teach camps in the weekends, and he would pay me a little bit and give me some running money and school money, and I'd fly back. And so I had made some contacts through doing that in Georgia, and met the gentleman that I ended up coming out of school and working for, long story short, and for a German REIT, a real estate investment trust. And they raised money out of Germany and would buy U.S. real estate, mostly in New York City. And so I was an underwriter for them. and property management analyst. And so by the time I was 23, 24, I was the underwriter or property management analyst on close to $5 billion in real estate. And so that opportunity came through wrestling. It came through helping people through wrestling, and would not have had it without it. And so I left that company at some point, and went on to do commercial real estate development, mostly on the retail side, doing build-to-suits and things like that. And then got recruited from another company to go and work in Charleston, South Carolina, to do more of the same, most from Walmart to McDonald's to Rick Hendrick dealerships to everything in between. And when I was doing a Rick Hendrick dealership in Durham, I was here. I mean, I was living in Charleston, but I was away from my family here probably, 3 weeks out of the month. And so I would not, it's a 5-hour drive. I'd get stuck on a day, and I had a meeting a day. So I had to waste some time sometimes. And so at night I got tired of the Durham bar. So I started driving around the area and just kind of checking out the scenery. And I ran across Warren County, and I was like, man, this place is beautiful. It's got rolling hills, kind of like Northern Virginia, horse country, but it's an hour away from Raleigh, and it's 20 minutes away from, where I live is 20 minutes away from Carr Lake and Lake Gaston. And it just struck me as a great place to live and invest also. So I called my wife and I said, I think, we should buy some land here. I think it's a good investment. Growth is coming up this way. And about a couple of days later, a broker that I had said to look out for me called me and said, hey, this farm is about to come for sale. It's 90 acres and it's right here. He showed me where it was. And I called my wife and I said, we've got to buy this farm. And I ended up buying it before she even saw it. And so I was like, look, you're going to love it. It's going to be great. And, but if you don't, it's an investment, so we can just hold on to it or sell it or whatever you want to do. And I'm so lucky to have I've got a beautiful, just so supportive wife that is amazing mother, amazing wife. And I told somebody the other day, I could tell her, I said, I'm going to start a company and we're going to build rocket ships. They're going to go to Jupiter. And she'd be like, that's awesome. You can do it, and seriously, so we bought the farm, and literally, and then very shortly after that, we kind of decided, like, hey, like, Charleston's getting a little busy. We don't have to. I got into the point in my career where I didn't have to really. I could do what I wanted to do, and so my wife's like, well, let's move up there and build a house up there. And so we decided to do that. And then we were going to have just a really efficient passive solar house. And then the electric company kind of pulled a switcheroo on us on, okay, it was going to cost this much to get to the middle of your property, because we're several thousand feet off the road. Mm-hmm. And then when we went to actually do it, they're like, oh no, it's going to be, this times 5, and being a wrestler and not liking to, have that happen to me, I said, okay, well, how much would it cost for me to buy solar panels and batteries and build an underground structure for the batteries and all that good stuff? And so I calculated that, and then told them that they could keep their power. We've been here in an off-grid passive solar house for 4 years. I think the house has been built. We've been here longer than that, but the house has been built, I think, for 4 years now. No electricity going to it, completely off-grid. I'm podcasting right now from an off-grid house that we produce the power for.
It's an amazing story, and I knew that your wrestler background had to have helped. All of this.
Oh, completely. And so the farm kind of naturally followed that. To answer your question, we have a huge property. So one of the first things I did was plant several thousand fruit and nut trees, and the wrestler came in, in handy there too, because before we had a tractor that had a planter device on it. There's days where I planted hundreds of trees with a shovel, and people were like, I think I'm gonna plant 10 trees this year. I think I'll get to that. I'm like, I planted 10 like this hour, but yeah, wrestling keeps coming back in your life, that it is and I've had wrestlers that I've helped come back and tell me, and I told them this when they're kids. I was like, you will look back on this and you'll see it as a point of strength that's going to help you. And I really believe that. I think too many people miss the point that the point of wrestling is to make you, a better human being, to make you more resilient, make you tougher. When you've been on a mat with somebody, and these kids these days, a lot of kids are, getting offended from what somebody says to you, whether it's appropriate or not. I mean, that's on them. But to let somebody get to you with words, is insane to me. I mean, we would literally fight in the wrestling room, and be hugging each other the next day, and bloody noses, cuts on eyes, and and literal fist fights, over things. And the next day we're hugging each other, and you better not talk bad about, one of the fellow wrestlers, they got your back, So it sticks with you for a long time. And I do wish though, I think a lot of people get out of, because wrestling's a tough sport, and it's a sport where you're very aggressive, but you don't have to take that off the mat. Off the mat, you should be kind to people and be good to people and help people. And you can have an attitude on the mat. A lot of people were surprised when I stepped off the mat, how I wasn't crazy. I wasn't, all, hyper, but when we're on the mat, I'm trying to rip your arms off, and legally, Wade Chalice said legal pain. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to make you feel as much pain as possible legally. But yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful discipline. And I mean, I can't recommend it enough for kids, especially kids that are having, problems. It's a great thing.
Yeah. I think kindness is a sign of strength. It's, when you are, going through these practices every day, you're building up your body, you're building up your mind as well, because it's all about mental conditioning as well. I think it's a huge sign of strength when you have people who can go out there and beat the crap out of each other and then be friends afterwards.
Yeah, and it's little times in life where when you have that confidence that and that's one reason I tell people you should be kind to people anyway, but you never know if somebody's a wrestler, right? I mean, look at Wade Chalice. I mean, Wade Chalice has got these big, look at me. I mean, I don't look like I'm very tough, and Wade Chalice has got these big Coke bottle glasses, and looks like a complete dork. But he is a bad dude, I mean, he's got the pin record, I think, still in the NCAAs. And you would never know it from talking to him. But I've heard stories of him being at bars and people picking fights with him and stuff, and just like that's exactly, you never know when you're going to run into a wrestler, and if for any other reason than that, you should be nice to people.
I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
So if people are interested in finding out more about you, more about your farm, you've got they're in luck because you've got a podcast of your own.
Yeah. We've got so like the plant SOWedible.com, and you just type in So Edible on Google. We're the first 20 that pop up. And we started this when we started the farm, and it goes from when we started all the way to now. We talk about, dogs we talk about how when we were planting trees, we talked about the tractor breaking down, we talk about being off grid, how we designed the house. And it's really you'll learn more about me than you ever wanted to know, for sure. But we don't talk about anything but sustainable development, which I'm very passionate about, and really just the life we live, And we started off, and like the first couple months, we're like, there's 2 people listening, like there 2 people download us on iTunes, and I think our biggest month now has been 40,000 downloads. Wow. In a month, which is just insane to me. And because we haven't advertised it at all, and we've gotten calls from the largest magazines for sustainable development in the world wanting us to podcast for them. So it's cool. It's cool. And if you want to check it out, love for people to check out soedible.com, and if you're a wrestler, and I love helping people out. I mean, if you hear this and you want to connect, even if I've never met you before, I'd love to help you out or give you some advice or whatever.
We'll put the link in the show notes. I've started listening to it, and I know you said that it gets better after the first few episodes, but I really like the first few episodes. I think they're pretty good. So I'm looking forward to listening to more.
Yeah, the general consensus that people say is, we like the podcast. Some stuff, but your wife's awesome. That's kind of our podcast.
Very nice. That sounds like a good dynamic.
It is. She is the star of the show for sure.
Yeah. Well, Stacy, I really appreciate having you on Back Points. This has been great. Really learned a lot today.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Would love to do it anytime.
Thanks for listening to Back Points today. If you want to support the show, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you find the show. Also, it helps us if you give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Feel free to also make a donation via Patreon at patreon.com/backpoints. Thanks, and see you next episode.